Transfigurations is the name of our next episode. It's episode number 73 of Star Trek The Next Generation, and it originally aired on June 19th, 1990. It was written by Renee Echevarria and directed by Tom Benko. Now, plot-wise with this episode, while charting a star system, the crew of the Enterprise discovers the wreckage of an escape pod on an M-class planet. Among the remains, they find a seriously injured humanoid and beam him to sickbay. Now, as Dr. Crusher stabilizes his vital signs and repairs his injuries, she notes a disturbing mutation of his cells, but is unable to diagnose the cause of it. Now, while the Enterprise continues its survey, the patient makes a rapid recovery. Unfortunately, he can't remember anything about himself or his past, so Dr. Crusher christens him John Doe. Now, the mutations in John Doe's cells continue, and now they're accompanied by energy surges. So, randomly, he feels like a huge burst of energy within his body. Now, in addition, John acquires the power to heal, and at one point he reaches out instinctively and repairs the torn ligaments in a crew member's shoulder. Now, working with a piece of equipment from John Doe's escape pod, LaForge and Data locate John's homeworld, which is a planet called Zalcon. The Enterprise's survey course brings it close to Zalcon 3 weeks later, and as the Enterprise approaches, a Zalconian ship rushes out to meet them. The Zalconian captain confronts the Enterprise and demands that Picard turn over John Doe for punishment, and claims that John Doe is a dangerous criminal. Now, at this point, John Doe's memories return, and the Zalconians stand on the verge of an evolutionary leap, a transfiguration into beings composed solely of energy. Now, the government of Zalcon has tried to suppress the change by killing anyone who manifested the symptoms. But John and a few others fled, and they were determined to let the transformation take its course. Moments later, John Doe changes into a being of light and departs the Enterprise as the Zalconians return to their world. And that's the end of the episode. Now, this particular episode was the second to last episode of the third season, and it had been bought by the producers, and all they really had to it was the initial premise, in which somebody had crashed from a ship onto a little moon, and there's a man who's basically dead, and they use miraculous 24th century medicine and bring him back to life. But beyond that, they didn't really know what else to do with it. So what they had to figure out was, who is this guy and what's his story? And that's how Transfigurations eventually came about. Now, originally, the plan was to have a story that was an environmental story. And this was going to be one that really talked about the dangers of pollution, and it was just a little too obvious. They actually had literal smokestacks, and everybody on this tribe was going to be suffering from blindness and mutations, and it was kept on a little island called the Island of Tears, and they were kept there hidden from view in order for the rest of the society to be able to maintain its mode of production, and it was highly exploitive and environmentally unsound. And the audience would have guessed basically at the end of the first act what was going on. So this was not going to be something that would really intrigue a lot of audiences, because it wasn't clever enough, frankly. Now, there was also an idea of coming up with a Federation colony that mined dilithium, and they're natives to that planet. And the twist was that what was causing the problems were these organisms that have evolved in the presence of electromagnetic fields of dilithium, and its removal was creating mutations. But when it was all said and done, they decided not to go that route, and instead they came up with the idea of somebody who didn't know who they were, and he was evolving into something that was no longer physical. And basically the aliens of his world didn't want anybody to know about this, so that's why they killed people who were starting to show these symptoms. And that does present a more interesting story, and I don't think you guess really where this is going as quickly. Some of you might have been able to tell as he displayed his symptoms, but I don't think it was as obvious as if they had gone the environmental route. And it really is consistent with the worldview of Gene Roddenberry, who, you remember, doesn't believe that there is a God, or that we should look to a God for purpose. In fact, it's humanity that solves its own problems, and they are going to better themselves. And even in the first episode of Encounter at Farpoint, and then other episodes with Q, Picard points out he sees humanity one day becoming something almost to the level of godhood that threatens the Q continuum. And this is kind of the emerging stages of this particular species, where they leave their physical bodies and become a being that's pure energy. So in this view, to become something better than you are, you have to get rid of that which is physical. That's unfortunate for poor Beverly Crusher here, who is attracted to John Doe and hopes to possibly start a relationship. But John Doe makes it clear that because of the changes that are going on with him, he has to concentrate on that before other considerations. So interesting that in order to become something better, you have to get rid of personal relationships. But that's the view of this episode. I think this was an episode that was interesting because it's the first time that we really see some possibilities with Beverly Crusher in a romantic way. We have seen some references to her being interested in Picard, but this is the closest that we come really up to this point of a romance for Crusher, but it just doesn't quite get there in the end. So, interesting story, and thank you guys for watching this one. Comment below to tell me what your thoughts are, and I will see you guys next time as we review the cliffhanger at the end of Season 3 called The Best of Both Worlds. Thanks, guys.